Are we live? I don't know what happened there. It was going good for a moment, and then everything just stopped. Just stopped. I don't know what happened. Huh. Things like that happen sometimes here on the channel. You have it all planned out, and then just it's like I don't know. It was like blowing a blowing a spark plug or something. Well, welcome everybody to Uncut History. Sorry about that abrupt end. I was enjoying the intro. I was getting into it and just went, nope, you're done. You can't play it anymore. Well, how's everybody doing this evening? We got a couple different things we're going to cover on the show. One big topic tonight. You can see it in the title. Then I got Twitter little things I want to touch on quickly. So, without any further ado, we're just going to jump right in, and we are talking about Fort LeBoeuf. Yep, Fort LeBoeuf. It's French, so you're gonna hear me butcher French. A Yinzer that can hardly speak English is now gonna struggle to speak French. This is gonna end well. This will be fantastic. So let's just go out of the way, and hopefully, if I share the screen, and boom, nothing will die or anything. That'll be horrifying. All right, let's go over here. All right, hopefully I've not been cut off because I think something like that happened earlier. Yep, no, we're on. Okay, cool. I don't know what happened. Anyways, we are talking about Fort LeBoeuf. Now, what brought this up is Fort LeBoeuf Historical Society. They are located in Waterford, Pennsylvania. They operate free museums: the Judson House, the Eagle Hotel, and their French and Indian War Museum, which is where we're going to be primarily focusing on today. They're having a little bit of problem. Their HVAC system in the Fort Museum kind of crapped out on them last week, and though they've been able to get a temporary solution, it's a temporary solution, and they are currently raising funds to get permanent HVAC. Now, I work in a similar museum, and we had a similar incident occur a number of years ago, so I somewhat relate to what they're going through at this time. I went in at one point I went in at one point. I was unlocking the museum I was working at, and I felt the atmosphere was very humid. And I opened this door, and here our heating system had ruptured overnight. I'm no expert on HVAC, but the hot water that was in the HVAC system essentially burst, soaked all the tiles in our drop ceiling, and all of them tiles had dropped right into our lobby. It was quite a horrifying sight. Thankfully, none of the artifacts were destroyed, but it was not the only time this happened. There was at least one other incident. I wasn't working that day, but apparently the HVAC went where some of the artifacts were, but they were able to get everything out before any flooding resulted. So I relate to what the people at Fort LeBoeuf are going through right now, and I wanted to bring awareness to their situation. So we're going to talk a little bit about what Fort LeBoeuf is all about. And I see Evelyn Music is asking, does that translate to beef fort? We will get into what all the naming is about. So we're going to switch over here. I want to see what happens if I do this. We're going to do that. Does it look cooler that way? I don't know. Let's start talking. All right. So we're going to look at this map here of Pennsylvania, and there's a lot going on. What I want you to focus on is where the Monongahela, Allegheny, and Ohio rivers meet. And I want you to focus on Fort Le Boeuf and Fort Presque Isle. We are going to the year 1753. And at this time, the British Empire would be on the East Coast with their British colonies, 13 British colonies. So if my cursor's showing up, Eastern Pennsylvania would have been a British colony to the Allegheny Mountains. Meanwhile, the French have colonies up in present day Canada, down along the Great Lakes, and also in New Orleans. They're coming up the Mississippi River. And essentially, what's happening is both the British and the French are expanding their colonies into the interior of North America. And in 1753, the French are getting pretty close to having complete control over the Ohio and Allegheny River corridor. Now, should the French get control of the Ohio River, they would be able to transport people and goods from one end of the continent to the other end. They'll have a essentially, this would be if the French get control of the Ohio River, it'd be to the Ohio River would be to the French colonies as the Transcontinental Railroad was to the United States in the 1800s, uniting their territory. Well, the British do not want that at all. The British want to expand west and they want control of the free rivers so they can get that bountiful land that we call Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, basically, so they're guaranteed westward settlement. Well, the British and the French kings are 3,000 miles away over in Europe. They can't come over and solve this matter. Instead, they're going to let their colonists solve the matter. And the British have, as I mentioned, 13 colonies. Now, Pennsylvania, though we're looking at a map of Pennsylvania, and our story is set in modern day Pennsylvania, does not involve a lot of Pennsylvanian players. It's going to be Virginia that has the most interest along the Free Rivers. And that's because, well, Virginia, we're a little clever. There's a border. The Pennsylvania charter kind of ends right around, if you see where Katanning is, right where the Allegheny River is. It didn't include the free rivers we know as the city of Pittsburgh today. Instead, the Virginians took advantage and just claimed everything west of Pennsylvania. And this would lead to disputes, which I have talked about briefly on the channel. If you want to check out the construction paper battlefield episode on the Battle of Point Pleasant, we'll get into all those squabbles between the Virginians and the Pennsylvanians over the free rivers. But the Virginia governor, Governor Dimwitty, and yes, those in the chat giggle. Did he say dumb? Did he say idiot? Dimwitty. That is his name. I think it's Dinwiddie. Governor Dimwitty is tasked by the royal government to send a message up to the nearest French official and tell them, get out of the Ohio River Valley. That is Virginia territory, aka this is British territory. Well, that's all great. This is 1753. You have to deliver that message, and there's no real couriers running between Williamsburg, Virginia, and up to Montreal, Canada. So Governor Dinwiddie's going to look around to the Virginia regiment, essentially their militia, and see does he have any mountain man, any militia man that is pretty well suited to go trekking through the several hundred miles of uncharted wilderness. Well, he's going to find one, and his name you may know is George Washington, and we're just going to bump right over here. There's his statue. George Washington, he is only 21 years old. He has just been appointed a major in the Virginia Regiment. And the whole reason he's being made a major, not because of his military experience, he's being thrown right into the military, but he has surveying experience. His first occupation at a young age of 16 was surveying land in the Ohio River Valley, what we know today as Western Pennsylvania, going out surveying these tracts of land so they can be sold to people back in Virginia. So he's mapped out, he's one of the few people from Virginia that has gone out and mapped out where Governor Dinwiddie needs to send a message through. So he makes Washington a major and gives him a mission. I have his letter that tells the nearest French official that the Ohio River Valley is King George II's domain. You have to vacate. You are trespassing. Now, Washington will not be alone. They're not that crazy. They're not just going to send him alone into the wilderness. As he makes his way from Virginia into what we know as Maryland, into Pennsylvania, he's going to start gathering a team. I think he had about a dozen people in total. The two people we want to talk about is Christopher Gist and Tana Grisson, sometimes referred to as Tana Cherison. Christopher Gist has been living in what we know today as Western Pennsylvania for several years now. He's a little bit older, far more wiser than Washington on how frontier life is, and is also familiar with the passage up to the Great Lakes, going up to where the French are. They're also going to have Tana Grisson. Tana Grisson is a Native American living in the region. Tana Grisson is called the Half King in a lot of historical records. And the reason for that is the British have appointed Tana Grisson as a Half King, as a potentially a medium between the British and these native tribes. He can speak between these two groups of people. Now, in the eyes of the Native Americans, particularly the Iroquois Confederacy, who Tenegrisson is a part of, he has no power. He only has power in the eyes of the British, and this is important for future history. So Washington in late November is going to begin making his trek. He's going to get to the Free Rivers, and he'll say it's a very good location to build a future fort. Maybe the British want to build a fort there to control the Free Rivers in the near future. Now, they don't, as far as I don't think they canoe up the Allegheny River. I believe they trek overland because they want to stay on the west side of the Allegheny River. And you can see on the map on their treks, the stops they're going to make are all on the west side of the Allegheny and on French Creek. So they actually trek overland. Now, there's a fort here on the map called Fort Michault. That fort was not there in winter of 1753. There is actually a native village called Venango, and there are indeed European traders set up in Venango. I believe that there's both English and French traders still set up here at this time. This is no man's land. Only individuals are coming out here to trade. This isn't no country yet. They're going to meet up there. They're going to gain some more supports or actually get a French escort to take them to the nearest fortification. Now, this creek here, which we call today French Creek, was actually called Beef Creek. And this is going to take me back to Evelyn Music's comment over does 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 Fort LeBoeuf mean Fort of Beef? Yes, it is a translation to the river LeBoeuf. There were all sorts of livestock grazed in this region for a while. So it was originally called Beef Creek. Washington didn't understand what Boeuf meant, so he just converted over to French Creek. He's like, "Oh, this is the fort where the French are," and Pennsylvanians today have just used that term. So it would have been originally Beef Creek, but today we call it French Creek. All right. So he's gonna continue making his way forward, making his way. Oh, I'm a little trapped there. Okay, there we go. He's gonna make his way up French Creek and he is going to arrive at Fort LeBoeuf December 11th, 1753. And rather than me summarize in a horrible manner what Washington encountered, I got his journal from the mission to Fort LeBoeuf. Look at that. Wonderful. You can access it through George Washington's Mount Vernon. So we're actually going to read what Major Washington wrote when he got to Fort LeBoeuf. Now we're actually going to start a little bit earlier when he leaves the village of Anango and goes up what was technically Beef Creek, but we know as French Creek today, thanks to Washington. At 11 o'clock, we set out for the fort and were prevented from arriving there till the 11th by excessive rains, snows, and bad traveling through many mires and swamps. There we were obliged to pass to avoid crossing the creek, which was impossible either by fording or rafting. The water was so high and rapid. We passed over much good land since we left Venango, and through several extensive and very rich meadows, one of which I believe was near 4 miles in length and considerably wide in some places. December 12th. I prepared early to wait upon the commander and was received and conducted to him by the second officer in command. So, for the record, he's arrived now at Fort LeBoeuf. I acquainted him with my business and offered my commission and letter, both of which he desired me to keep till the arrival of Monsieur Ripetari, captain at the next fort, who is sent for and expected every hour. So this Monsieur Ripetari is actually coming down from Presque Isle, which is a French fort located on the banks of Lake Erie. I think it's about 20 to 30 miles between Presque Isle going south to Le Boeuf. This commander is a knight of the military Order of St. Louis and named, oh, I'm about to say some French. Get ready to have your ears bleed if you're a French viewer. Le Gardeur de Saint Pierre. He is an elderly gentleman and has much the air of a soldier. He was sent over to take the command immediately upon the death of the late general and arrived here about 7 days before me. At 2 o'clock, the gentleman who was sent for arrived, and when I offered the letter, etc., again, which they received, and adjourned into a private apartment for the captain to translate, who understood little English. After he had done it, the commander desired I would walk in and bring my interpreter, persuade, and correct it, which I did. December 13th. The chief officers retired to hold a council of war, which gave me an opportunity to take the dimensions of the fort. And making what observations I could, it is situated on the south or west fork of French Creek, near the water, and is almost surrounded by the creek and a small branch of it which forms a kind of island. Four houses compose the sides. The bastions are made of piles driven into the ground, standing more than 12 feet above it, and sharp at top, with portholes cut for cannon and loopholes for the small arms to fire through. There are 8 6-pound pieces mounted in each bastion, and one piece of 4 pound before the gate. The bastions are a guardhouse, chapel, doctor's lodging, and the commander's private store, round which are laid platforms for the cannons and men to stand on. There are several barracks without the fort, for the soldiers' dwelling, covered some with bark and some with boards, made chiefly of logs. There are also several other houses, such as stables, smiths, and shops. So, just to give you a brief idea, when he's talking about 6 pound, 4 pounds, he's talking about artillery pieces. And I was shocked when I started reading this. It's been a while since I'd read the journal. I didn't realize how armed to the teeth Fort LeBoeuf was, considering this is late winter 1753. They're packing. They're packing. I'm gonna switch over briefly. I want to give you a bit of a visual of what Fort LeBoeuf would have looked like. And not that one. Not that one. That one. There we go. So this gives you a visual drawing. This is a 19th century drawing of what Fort LeBoeuf would have looked like based on Washington's interpretation. And I'm it's very an interesting design. It's 2 layers thick. We got a palisade wall. That's the outer wall there, palisade. We got posts staked into the ground like telephone poles, essentially. Looks like we got gardens within the palisade wall, got a few lean-tos, soldiers are encamped. Then we got the star fort that makes up the inner portion. And as Washington described, the back walls of some of the buildings were doubled as the walls of the fortification, which was common for temporary fortifications. I've been to Fort Steuben or Steuben out in Steubenville, Ohio. It was built in the 1780s. They did something very similar. And I was always they have a lot of facilities here. I mean, chapels, all sorts of lodging. I Fort LeBeouf is a lot bigger than I was initially imagining, which why it deserves to be why we deserve to preserve the memory of it. Sorry about the motorcycle in the background. I do live in the countryside, but you know, sometimes people decide they want to be heathens. All right, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to Washington. Where was I leaving off? Okay, there we are. I could get no certain account of the number of men here, but according to the best judgment I could form, there are 100 exclusive of officers, of which there are many. I also gave orders to the people who were with me to take an exact account of the canoes which were hauled up to convey their forces down in the spring. This they did and told 50 of birch bark and 170 of pine, besides many others which were blocked out with readiness to make. December 14th. Ah, December 14th. As the snow encroached very fast and our horses daily became weaker, I sent them off unloaded under the care of Barnaby Curran and 2 others to make all convenient dispatch to Venango and there wait our arrival. If there was a prospect of the river's freezing, if not, then to continue down to Town at the forks of the Ohio, and there to wait till we come to the crossing of the Allegheny, intending myself to go down by water as I had the offer of a canoe or two. So essentially, Washington, he's sent his horses down. They're starting to make their way down to Venango, and Venango, the village which is south of Fort LeBoeuf, it is at the fork of French Creek into the Allegheny River. So he's hoping that if it freezes entirely, they can just cross at Venango on the east side of the Allegheny River, and then they don't have to worry about any more river crossings the whole way home. If it doesn't freeze, they're going to have to they're going to have to travel by foot still. You have to understand it's very unsafe right now in the waters because if it you got these icy chunks still floating, so it can cause some damage to rafts. So Washington, he's getting ready to run away. All right. Where was I? Okay. Okay. As I found many plots concurred to retard the Indians' business and prevent their returning with me, I endeavored all that lay in my power to frustrate their schemes and hurry them on to execute their intended design. They accordingly pressed for admittance this evening, which at length was granted them, privately with the commander and one or two other officers. The half king told me that he offered the wampum to the commander, who evaded taking it, and made many fair promises of love and friendship, said he wanted to live in peace and trade amicably with them, as proof of which he could send some goods immediately down to the Logstown for them. But I rather think the design of that is to bring away all our straggling traders they meet with, as they privately understood they intend to carry an officer, etc., with them. Now, what rather confirms this opinion? I was inquiring of the commander by what authority he had made prisoner of several of our English subjects. He told me that the country belonged to them, that no Englishman had a right to trade upon those waters, and that he had orders to make every person prisoner who attempted it on the Ohio or the waters of it. Ooh-wee. So Washington's getting frustrated by this point because he'll go in, he'll talk with the French commander, then he'll come out, and the French commander will ask Tennygristen to go in with the native scouts of Washington. They're talking in private. They're not talking uniformly, and Washington suspecting what's happening is that the officer at Fort LeBoeuf is trying to pry Tanner Grissom away from Washington, try to win the support of the Ohio River natives to the French side if a forthcoming war is about to happen. And well, if you know my channel, yes, there was a war that resulted from all of this. So Washington's getting a little restless, and finally the commander sits down, tells Washington, "Look, you I know you came all this way. I see the piece of paper. That's just a piece of paper. I'm going to keep going south down the Allegheny River, and I am going to build a fort at the Free Rivers and lay control to it. It will not be British territory." So it sounds like Washington's mission has all but been noble, but all but failed. But let's finish out the story. I inquired of Captain Ripatari about the boy who was carried by this place, as it was done while the command devolved on him, between the death of the late general and the arrival of the present. He acknowledged that a boy had been carried past, and that the Indians had two or three white men's scalps, but pretended to have forgotten the name of the place which the boy came from, and all the particular facts, though he had questioned him for some hours, as they were carrying him past. I likewise inquired what they had done with John Trotter and James McLaughlin, two Pennsylvania traders whom they had taken with all their goods. They told me that they had been sent to Canada, but were now returned home. This evening I received an answer to his honor, the governor's letter from the commandant. December 15th. The commandant ordered a plentiful store of liquor, provisions, etc., to be put on board our canoe, and appeared to be extremely complacent, though he was exerting every artifice which he could invest to set out our own Indians at variance with us, to prevent their going till after our departure. Presents, rewards, and everything which could be suggested by him or his officers. I can't say that ever in my life I suffered so much anxiety as I did in this affair. I saw that every stratagem which the most fruitful brain could invent was practiced to win the half king to their interest, and that leaving him here was giving them the opportunity they aimed at. I went to the half king and pressed him in the strongest terms to go. He told me the commandant would not discharge him till the morning. I then went to the commandant and desired him to do their business, and complained of ill treatment for keeping them, as they were part of my company, was detaining me. This he promised not to do, but to forward my journey as much as he could. He protested he did not keep them, but was ignorant of the cause of their stay, and though I soon found it out, he had promised them a present of guns if they would wait till the morning. As I was very much pressed by the Indians to wait this day for them, I consented on a promise that nothing should hinder them in the morning. December 16th. The French were not slack in their inventions to keep the Indians to stay, although. But as they were obligated, according to promise, to give the present, they then endeavored to try the power of liquor, which I doubt not would have prevailed at any other time than this. But I urged and insisted with the king so closely upon his word that he refrained and set out with us as he had engaged. We had a tedious and very fatiguing passage down the creek. Several times we had like to have been staved against rocks, and many times were obliged all hands to get out and remain in water half an hour or more, getting over the shoals. At one place the ice had lodged and made it impassable by water. Therefore we were obliged to carry our canoes across a neck of land, a quarter of a mile over. We did not reach Venango till the 22nd, where we met with our horses. And we're gonna end there as Washington has left Fort LeBoeuf. So, in short, Washington spent a couple days at Fort LeBoeuf with Tanner Grissom and Christopher Gist. They delivered the message to the elderly commandant of Fort LeBoeuf, and what resulted was that commandant trying to drag things out, having separate meetings with Major Washington and with Tenagrisson. And Washington presumes there's a meeting between Tenagrisson and the commandant, were essentially the commandant trying to pull the natives away from the British side and get them on the French side. Half King appears to have stuck to his word. Tenagrisson stuck with Washington, and although Washington wasn't happy that he had to wait around a few days, the Tenagrisson and Washington left together from Fort LeBoeuf. As you can figure from all this mess, nothing was gained in the dispute between Britain and France. If anything, the British were now aware that the French were determined to get down to the Free Rivers by spring of 1754, which meant that the Virginia government was going to have to rapidly expand its regiment and get their own feet on the ground at the Free Rivers. What this all is essentially leading to is the French and Indian War. Uh, in spring of 1754, Washington would be sent up, now commissioned as a lieutenant colonel. He would be sent up to try to build a fort at the Free Rivers. Ultimately, he gets reports that he was too late. The French have already established an outpost. You would know that as Fort Duquesne, which is where the name Duquesne University comes from, actually. Washington will meet up with Tanagrisson that spring. Tanagrisson will tell Washington there's a French war party near his encampment, and that will result in the Jumonville Glen incident, which I do have a video on this channel, although I want to update it. And at the end of this shootout between Washington and his Virginians against these French officers, a French officer was mortally wounded. Some believe was killed by Tanagrisson because Tanagrisson was upset the French got to the Free Rivers before the British did. Tanagrisson had supported the British. He lost that gamble when the French got the Free Rivers. And thus began one of the largest wars in recorded history up to that point, the French and Indian War, sometimes known as the 7 Years' War. The prelude to all this occurred at Fort LeBoeuf, which is why it is so important. Now I'm going to go back over here, back over here. Where's here? I don't know. Anywhere's here. All right. So a little bit more about Fort LeBoeuf. It didn't see any major battles during the French and Indian War. And as the French moved south down the Allegheny River, Fort Duquesne became the prioritized fort in Pennsylvania. Now, they did have a chain of forts. So going from north to south, during the French and Indian War, the French could supply Fort Duquesne, starting with Fort LeBoeuf. Oh, wow. I already messed up. Wow. Starting with Fort Presque Isle, Fort LeBoeuf, Fort Machault, which was built at the Venango Village, and then they would portage down the Allegheny River to Fort Duquesne. And if you wanted to, then go all the way down the Ohio into the Mississippi and down to New Orleans. The French would hold on to the Free Rivers until 1758. British forces led by General Forbes were able to kick the French out of Fort Duquesne once and for all. The British built a new fort at the Free Rivers called Fort Pitt, which is where you get the name Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania from today. The French retreated back to Fort LeBoeuf, where in the summer of 1759, orders were given for all of the French forts in Pennsylvania to be burned and evacuated. Those garrisons pulled back to Canada. Fort LeBoeuf's garrison was no different. The British built a new fort, apparently. We don't know much about it, but they must have built a new fort because they do refer to a Fort LeBoeuf in the early 1760s. That too was destroyed during an event known as Pontiac's Rebellion, where native tribes in what we know today as the Midwest started attacking British fortifications, trying to drive English settlers out of North America. The rebellion was ultimately unsuccessful. Now, in the 1790s, the United States government did establish a blockhouse at Fort LeBoeuf. It was only there, though, for a few years to allow settlers to move in safely and establish communities like Waterford, Pennsylvania, where the Fort LeBoeuf Museum is. Now, the Fort LeBoeuf Historical Society, as I mentioned, owned three different museums. Now, the French and Indian War Museum is located on the premises. I think it's actually adjacent to where Fort LeBeouf once stood. We can actually go look the magic. We can just go right to the page. It's wonderful. So here's a little write up here about the Fort LeBeouf Museum. South of the Judson House is the Fort LeBeouf Museum. Built on the site of the original French fort, this modern building includes numerous exhibits on the Indians who lived here, the French and British fur trade, and archaeological excavations of the site that was conducted by Edinburgh University. The museum is open for touring. See the sidebar for hours of operation. Group tours by appointment. Mission is free, but donations are accepted and appreciated to help maintain the museum. There's an image of the blockhouse I was mentioning about. Wall text there. So that's one of the free museums. So it's not a historic fort, it's just a museum about the fort, but it helps interpret the story that I was reading from Washington's words. They interpreted way better than probably I was doing there. I was gibbering through. So, go to the Fort LeBeouf Museum to properly understand Washington's stay at that outpost. But they have a couple other sites. The Historical Society actually operates free museums. They build it as a campus, so they're all free, like located around a town square. You got the Eagle Hotel, constructed in 1826, with locally quarried stone. This is why you really tune in to these to watch me stutter and mess up and laugh. That's why you guys really watch. Just reading in for here. The big claim to fame, aside from being in a hotel in the early 1800s, Zachary Taylor actually stayed overnight at the hotel. I think they have a whole room decked out just dedicated to his stay. So it's a really cool. It's on the National Registry. I always like cool hotels. Who doesn't like cool hotels? And they also got the Judson House, which is from 1810, and it's believed to actually sit on the fort site. And when they did the archaeology back in the day, they were finding colonial period artifacts, which are now displayed in the Fort LeBeouf Museum. Oh, it even says here they found charcoal, which I believe is the remains of either the French or the British fort when they were burned down. Now, this building is eventually, I think the end goal, they want to make it into a genealogical library and a gift shop. I think that's the end goal. Unfortunately, they've been having problems also. Back in October, a very bad rainstorm hit the Waterford area. And as you can see here, severe damage was caused to the roof of the Judson House. And they did start, one of the volunteers did start a fundraiser. Roof leaked the last time it rained, which caused the kitchen ceiling to collapse, and it also damaged two of the bedrooms and the library. We got permission from the PHMC to replace the existing wooden shingle roof with a standing seam metal roof. The least expensive estimate we received for a new roof was $24,000. We don't have the money. We can get a matching grant of $15,000, but there are stipulations with it. Work has to be done by December 1st. As I mentioned, okay, so this actually might be out. I don't know if this is still active. This I know is active. So this is their donation for HVAC replacement. We mentioned earlier. What essentially happened was a couple days ago, the HVAC system, which is 20 years old in the building, went. It's quite expensive to replace HVAC, and understand that the Fort LeBeouf Historical Society is predominantly ran by volunteers. It's a small town museum effort, so any donations will help to get a new HVAC system in. will keep the museum open and allow future generations to learn about the first military mission of the future first president of our country. Here's some photos of what the museum looks like. There's the HVAC system on the roof. Oh, got a model of the fort. Can I open that photo? Here. We got a volunteer here. There's a model of Fort LeBoeuf on display in the museum. And then a photo of some of our volunteers. Some of the volunteers. And they do have a video. We'll watch a little bit of the video if you guys don't mind. All right. And that gentleman did a way better job of summing up the situation of 1753 in 2 minutes that took me to do it in 10. God, I ramble way too much. All right. I'm gonna put a link in for the GoFundMe and just a general link. Oh, there was no audio. Sorry about that. Was the do do I have no audio or did the video have no audio? Because I'll take the video having no audio because I'm about to post a link and Everlay Music let me know. Well, I wait for a response. This is the very long GoFundMe link. Too long. Maybe I should. I'm gonna. There is. It's in the description. I did put it in the description for the GoFundMe link. I might have to make a short link for it. And let me also be sure. I'm gonna put in just a general link. And if you go to the Fort LeBoeuf Historical Society YouTube channel, I've watched that video before. I do remember it now. I've watched it before. So if you want to watch that volunteer give a full tour of the museum, go right on ahead. I highly recommend it. Burr, 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 burr. Okay, the video had no audio. So what I noticed last week when I was sharing some of the videos for the Indiegogos, they were having audio, but it was very faint. Now I had that volume turned on pretty decently. It's still a work in progress. It's still a work in progress. I'll learn eventually, right? All right. This is a link just for the Fort LeBoeuf Historical Society. So if you want to go in and learn all more about what it is. But we got a few other things I want to talk about before we wrap up today. Delete that. Delete that. Delete that. Okay. This is what I want to talk about. So I saw this today on one of my Civil War pages. This is from a Tennessee news outlet. It's the only article I can find on it. But muskets removed from University of Tennessee dorm room. University of Texas Knoxville student is charged with carrying weapons on school property after police took two muskets from his dorm room on Saturday. University police respond to Laurel Hall around 5 p.m. on March 25th after dorm staff reported someone walking into the residence holding what appeared to be a musket. Student was identified through video surveillance. According to court documents, officers made contact with him in the lobby of the hall. Officers were given consent to enter his room, where they retrieved two musket rifles, black powder, primers, and two bayonets. Brandon Dowd, 19, was charged with carrying weapons on school property. He's set to be arraigned on Tuesday, April 4th. Oh, they don't give you a lot. So, what is happening is, let me see if I can find from earlier today. Yes, I know it's MSN, but this is the article I saw earlier. Is it? No. I saw an article earlier and now I can't find it. They took it. The Matrix took it. Welcome to the unprepared world of doing live streams. Okay, this might be it. Okay, this is the Daily Beacon, editorial, independent student newspaper, University of Tennessee. Should have just gone to this first. Idiot Spencer, or idiot Sinji. I should start making Evangelion references. Anyways, student arrested for bringing musket rifles into Laurel Hall as Civil War reenactor. Brandon Dowd, a freshman studying sociology, who was arrested by UTBD officers on Saturday, bringing two musket rifles into his dorm, told the Daily Beacon that he uses the rifles for Civil War reenactments and that he had brought the rifles into Laurel on several occasions before. On Saturday, Dowd was arrested after 5 p.m., taken into custody. Stayed in jail for the night and was released early the next morning. His muskets, which were found alongside black powder, primers, and bayonets, have been confiscated until a court verdict. In Tennessee, as a Class B misdemeanor to carry a firearm on campus that is not solely for instructional or school sanctioned ceremonial purposes. Misdemeanor is punishable with up to 6 months in jail and up to $500 in fines. Carrying a weapon from the intent to go armed is a felony. Dowd, who has been working with the National Park Service on reenactment projects, said he plans to fight the misdemeanor charges in court. Dowd has been planning to participate in a filmed reenactment before the rifles were confiscated, and he was able to explain the situation to officers before his arrest. They were pretty respectful about it, and I could tell they didn't really want to. They thought it was stupid, but of course, they were doing their job as well, Dowd said. Dow does not have a permit to carry the muskets, but believed it was okay to store them on campus since multiple authority figures, including RAs, had seen him with the guns previously. No full-time non-student employees of the university who have an enhanced handgun carry permit may carry concealed handguns. They must notify the police department and complete paperwork with the presence of a sworn officer. When I did dorm checks, they didn't say anything about it last semester or this semester. I've walked into the building 20 or more times with both my muskets. Dowd's work as a reenactor raises money to support the preservation of historical battlefields, and he is a part of the multiple reenactment organizations, which he said have raised tens of thousands of dollars for National Park Trust. With an arrest now on his record at a crisis point for the national firearms debate, Dowd took issue with the nature of this detainment. Lawfully, I believe it's justified, but morally, I don't believe it's justified. So what we essentially got happening here, this college student was arrested for having two rifled muskets in his possession. Or, uh, now, of course, I'm on my maze screen, so I can't tell what what gun he's carrying. Looks like a Springfield 6061. I don't know. Not important. So looking into it, my I don't want to give too much of my own thoughts because either way, I'm gonna angerify somebody. I What's interesting to me is that he was allowed to come in and out of his dorm sounds quite frequently with no issues before. So they're trying to use the you can't carry a firearm on campus, which you can't carry a firearm on campus. That is the school's those are the school's rules. I understand that, but it, they clearly weren't enforcing those rules. It doesn't seem like they really were trying. So either the rules do matter and they just weren't enforcing it, which is lousiness on on the college police part, or it's not. And it's not a violation considering it's an these would be considered antique firearms. I think even the reproductions. So it doesn't matter because it's not what we would view as a threatening firearm today, and it's only being done as a result of what has happened in Tennessee the past week. And I won't mention any more on that for the sake of YouTube striking me. I don't know what I'm allowed and not allowed to say on that, and I'm not here to talk about current events on that scale. It's an interesting conversation piece to have. I thought I'd bring it up. College student who's doing living history. I am also a college student does living history. Now, I don't live on campus, obviously. I can have my guns in my house. And the only firearms that I have in my possession this time are antique firearms, or what you consider antiques. So I guess it just caught my attention. I can relate to the article. I'm very torn on the situation. I see where the police department's coming from, but I also believe the student is has a. I think the student has a reason to say, yes, but these are considered antique firearms. These are firearms that are not a threat to the environment, and nobody has enforced that rule until now. And it seems like you're only enforcing now because of recent situations. And they also seem to be escalating the situation when, I mean, if you look at a musket and you realize, oh yeah, this is not like a this is not like a this is not an assault rifle or anything. This is a very different thing. And I don't know. I just kind of caught my interest. I'm a similar age as this student. So we'll see what happens here. We'll see what it leads to in the living history community. Now, I do have one other thing to do. Oh, before I'm going to drop an article. I want to drop a link for the article. All right. There's the article if anybody wants to read it. So one other thing I want to talk about. This Monday, I was invited by Frequency Studios, aka Wrangler, on YouTube to take part in his weekly Wing It. I was on with a panel of several other, I guess you want to say, indie authors. Now, I don't really consider myself an indie creator at this time. I am working on some short story stuff, but it's kind of on the back burner as I work on doing some videos and working on college at the moment. But I do have a very keen interest in new independent books, comics, movies, media, essentially. And I did a live stream last week talking all about is why does it feel like that all of our movies suck today? Or are we in a renaissance? And you can go watch last week's live stream about that. So I was invited to come on to the stream, had a blast. I'm usually in the chat every week for the weekly Language, so it was fun to actually be on screen and get directly interact with everybody. So to return the favor, I figure we will talk about now through Amazon. It's available. Hardcover $17.99, paperbacks $12.99. But before I tell you to buy it, let me tell you a little bit what's about. On a potato farm in a rural Connecticut town lives an empathic, emphatic girl named Haley Starr and her father Harry. It's been a day, folks. The day after her 10th birthday and before Halloween is when they came. Invaders from another reality captured most of the townspeople and replaced them with strange copies. Haley narrowly escaped, and her day became stranger still when she encountered the Egyptian goddess Bastet. Haley learns from Bastet how to use her own mystical energy to protect herself from the invaders, but she soon enters an underground facility beneath the town to find herself in a world of mysticism and strange technologies. Now, Haley, with her best friend Elizabeth and the help of some U.S. Marshals, must learn about the larger nature of her reality. The girls must wisely use their energetic abilities to stay alive, but more importantly, they must learn to understand themselves in order to handle the challenges ahead. I doxed myself. The horror. Anyways, I did get a few things there in the nonfiction department to grow the nonfiction collection, and it's going to collapse on me when I sleep tonight. We got Chancellorsville by Stephen W. Steers. I'm considering doing a construction paper battlefield on Chancellorsville. Now, if I do it, it's going to be a beast of a episode to do. So tell me in the comments if you want me to do the Chancellorsville one. I can only do so many construction paper battlefields. During the pandemic, I was doing them every month because I had nothing to do. But now with work, college, and a whole bunch of other side projects I'm into, I really can only probably get 2 out a year. So if you want me to do Chancellorsville, I got the book. I got the definitive book on the Battle of Chancellorsville. And I also been starting to get interested into the Bosnian War. because when we talk about a possibility of a peaceful divorce here in the United States, a lot of people are against it because they'll say balkanization did not end well. So I want to educate myself on what happened when we divided up Yugoslavia back in the 1990s, including the Bosnian War. So got a few things for the shelf. And that is going to do our stream. We're clocking in at 50. Every stream's getting slightly longer and longer. Hopefully you've hopefully you've come away with learning one new thing about our history today. It's been a while since I've done a proper history. Felt pretty good today. I felt pretty good. The Waco one, I just stuttered the whole way through. That is a scary but unfortunate real prospect. Yeah. Which part? The part where my bookshelf collapses on me or the dachshund part? Both. Both are. But I felt this one was a little more, my brain was in sync. So, uh, be sure if you're interested in the story of Fort LeBoeuf that I told you tonight, and you would like for it to be told for future generations, be sure to go learn about the Fort LeBoeuf Historical Society. And if you do have the ability, consider supporting their GoFundMe so they can get a new HVAC system. HVAC system, it'll do wonders. Oh, the organization. Yes, another very real prospect. Uh, if you want to help support my channel, Read Up Productions, there's a couple ways you can do it. For one, if you're watching this and if you're watching this and you haven't hit the like button, what are you doing? You hit the like button. It's down there. It's not hard. It's right there. It's right there. I'm pretty confident. It's right there. Hit it. Hit it. There you go. Now you're hitting it. That's the first way to tell the algorithm that you want to see more videos like this. The second way is to go and subscribe to the channel, and it should also be there should be a button right down there. Right down there. You hit and allow you to subscribe, and you'll be the first notified whenever I do go live, whenever I have a video. And if you do want to go the extra mile and help me wake up every morning with a nice warm cup of cappuccino, you can support me on Ko-fi. That's my temporary donation page at the moment, and there is a link to that down in the description. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Let's try to play the. I was enjoying that. I was enjoying the what was I gonna say? I was enjoying. I tried to do an intro video. I had music and then it stopped. You can accidentally music. It just let's try to exit with it. Have a great day, guys.